Hello everybody, a very warm welcome at this third webinar in the WaterSolutions series of the Amsterdam International Water Week. My name is Bart Krul and I'll be moderating this webinar and this series in which we take a deep dive into the 4 sub-themes that are all part of the Amsterdam International Water Week. Together with scientists, innovators and experts from cities, the industry, NGOs, we bring new insights and perspectives to the table. For this third webinar, the main question is, how do we build resilient and adaptive systems for risk preparedness? We will talk about various things, among others, the adaptive and resilience designs of water infrastructure to address challenges of water quality, floods and droughts. We will talk about the importance of availability and access to data-driven early warning and implementing systems. And we will talk about the role of financial investors. And also, of course, the results of the Climate Adaptation Summit that took place this January will be highlighted. And as I said, this all leads to the Amsterdam International Water Week that takes place in November this year with its main theme, Blue-Green Deals with Integrated Solutions. Let's take a look at some practical information, also relevant for a webinar like this. First of all, the webinar is being recorded. And if you are on social media and you'd like to share some of the insights that are presented, please use the hashtag that is mentioned below. And of course, we would like your participation. We are eager to learn about the questions and insights that you might have. So please use the Q&A function in the Zoom area. And there are specific times where we see what questions we can select to get them answered by one of the experts we have invited. And in the meantime, we have also asked our speakers to follow the Q&A. So maybe if there's no time for all the questions that are being asked, they can also answer them in the Q&A function. Let's take a first look at the program outline for this afternoon. There's 3 parts in our webinar today. First part focuses on urban climate resilience and adaptation, both at city scale with examples from Copenhagen and Rotterdam. Part 2 focuses on learning through examples of good practices coming from, among others, Indonesia, Florida, and USA, and Amsterdam. And the third part will cover the financial investments in water projects and discussion. And we will close at 4:15, so we have a bit more than 70 minutes left for to make sure we get all the insights we are looking for. So let's go to part 1, urban climate resilience and adaptation. We will talk about the Climate Adaptation Summit that took place this year, I told you earlier, and we will talk about the 1,000 Cities Adapt Now project. And for this, I'd like to invite Arnoud Molenaar on stage. He's the Chief Resilience Officer of the City of Rotterdam, and he's the lead for cities at Global Climate Adaptation. And well, he will also give some innovative examples of Rotterdam's resilience strategy. So Arnoud, a warm welcome to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart. And I presume my slides will be on the screen. Yes. So thank you very much. I understand I do have 5 minutes, which is really short, of course. So I will touch upon very briefly on 3 things, and that's the Climate Adaptation Summit, the 1,000 Cities Adapt Now program, and ending with some inspiring insights of the city of Rotterdam. Next slide, please. So about the CAS, the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021, which was held on January the 25th. I can talk an hour about this. I think I can highlight a few things. So the main goal of this Adaptation Summit was to create awareness, but get adaptation higher on the international agenda. And I think I think we have to compliment the Dutch government that they, I think, succeeded in this. The main message was actually we need to accelerate and to scale adaptation globally, additional to working on mitigation. So the Paris Agreement is really focusing on mitigation, but we also have to highlight adaptation. So towards the COP26, this now gets a serious topic on the agenda. And the second component is that we that the summit delivered conclusions and initiatives on specific topics like infrastructure, like nature-based solutions, water resilience, locally led actions, etc., etc. And I think there is a good overview when you go to the website CAS 2021. You will see on all those specific topics the outcomes. One of the outcomes, and that's the bridge to the next slide, is the 1,000 Cities Adapt Now program, which has been launched officially by the mayor of the city of Rotterdam. So next slide, please. And was handed over to Ban Ki-moon and other heads of states. And this is focusing on the city part. And not meant to read. This is also on the website of the CAS 2021 and on the Rotterdam website. This initiative is set up by the Global Center on Adaptation in Rotterdam, but also the WRI, the World Resources Institute, together with the Resilient Cities Network and UN Habitat. This is the core group, but other partners like Deltares and many more joined this effort to accelerate adaptation in cities, and not by creating a new city network, but act as a kind of a delivery mechanism and to collaborate together in the first place in the cities where these institutes are active. And they want to focus on several topics like collaborating in the cities. It sounds very simple, but this is really crucial to start with. But then really intensively work on a transformative capacity building in a practical way, and more also regarding science and knowledge development, and specifically accelerate and scale solutions related to three topics. That's the nature-based solutions, urban water resilience, and especially resilience for what we call the urban poor, the more locally led actions. And there will be data collecting and the monitoring of this program. Next slide, please. And as this is, well, quite recently announced, you can imagine that this is an ongoing process. We are developing this. We are developing a scaling mechanism. We are developing a way how to expand the partnerships, but also thinking about the role of cities and the mayors that endorsed this program, and how to find best practices and to use this to scale to other cities and to help other cities. And that's one of the things the Global Center on Adaptation is doing, to develop what we call the City Adaptation Accelerator, which is a package of tools developed by ourselves, but also already existing tools to help cities with this capacity building, helping them with developing climate adaptation strategies, for example, but also specific risk assessments and prepare the cities to develop bankable projects, etc. Of course, we start with existing funding of those coalition partners, but it would be great to find more funding because otherwise we will not reach the 1,000 cities in the coming decade, because that's the idea, to reach out to 1,000 cities the coming 10 years. And this will also be linked to the R2R, that's the Race to Resilience, which is an important vehicle on the COP26. Next slide, please. And so I already mentioned that we want to harvest and collect best practices, and that's why I'm also showing this slide. So the headquarters of the Global Center is located in Rotterdam. So it makes sense to also use the knowledge that this city has been developed and to link that to the City Adaptation Accelerator and the other tools to accelerate to other cities. But of course, we also want to harvest and work together with other, you could say, hubs, urban hubs, the champions amongst along the world in cities, like my dear colleague Likke, who will be the next speaker. And this is a variety of examples going on in Rotterdam. and it's from the scale of working on permeable tiles up to the storm surge barrier, you could say, and everything in between, like floating solutions, but also the water squares, and where we intensively work more and more work together with the citizens, which is a crucial trend. And my final slide shows the importance of linking everything to, well, not everything, of course, but especially adaptation. We think there's a momentum now due to COVID-19. A lot of, well, cities and nations are working on economical recovery, and that's the moment to include adaptation and to use the recovery to accelerate and scale adaptation. And this is just one example happening in Rotterdam. We are focusing on the so-called Big Seven huge city projects. One of them is in this old port area. And just, well, in the framework of practice what you preach, the global center is being located in this new floating office, which of course is an iconic symbol of well, adaptive building, you could say. But the main message is we have to connect accelerating adaptation to recovery from COVID-19. I think I leave it here, quite short, but there will be time for some questions, I hope.
Thanks a lot, Arnoud, for your concise presentation. I can imagine there's plenty more to tell, but we were very, we only gave you 5 minutes, so thanks a lot for this this presentation. I'd like to go straight to Lieke Lennartsen. Her name was already introduced by Arnoud. We switch from the global perspective and the Rotterdam perspective to Copenhagen in Denmark. Lieke is the head of the program for resilient and sustainable city solutions, and she's also connected to the C40 Cities program. Lieke, welcome at this webinar. Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here, and thank you to Arno for the kind words. I can surely, I have been working with Arno for many years. I will start locally and actually then move up globally, actually taking the opposite direction of what Arno just did. So can I have my first slide, please? Yeah, and then the next one. Yeah, because we are looking at here at a city where we can say we have some certain challenges. On the left-hand side, you can see one of the main roads in.
Lieke, sorry to interrupt you. Your sound's a bit low. Could you adjust something in your
Is it better now?
This is much better. Thanks a lot.
Okay, I'll just move the mic a little closer up. As I was saying, this is a challenge for Copenhagen. One of our challenges is a lot of rain and flooding roads. And to work with that, we started looking at what everybody was doing, sort of, could we just expand the existing system? But we soon found out that this was not an option. We needed to think differently. We needed to work on the surface, and we needed to look for solutions that could also improve the daily life for people in Copenhagen when it was not raining. Next slide, please. And the solution for us was a cloudburst management plan that covers the entire city and mainly based on surface solutions, combining stormwater management with urban space improvement. It's 300 projects, and it's going to cost the city around 2 billion euros and will take 20 years to implement. So it's a big project. Copenhagen is a relatively small city, but still it's still a very big project. But the good thing is that we have the financing in place, so we are going along and we are well into the implementation. I'll show you a few slides later. And what's key here is actually to have the plan. The plan is not something that is rock solid. We need to adapt as we go along, both because climate projections change, but also because the city change. We are doing all this work in a very close collaboration with our Greater Copenhagen utility. So it's not just the city, it is utility in a good partnership, developing and implementing this plan. Next slide. one of our key issues is actually to work with co-benefits, looking at where we can create recreational value, more biodiversity, social resilience through creating meeting places, health improvements, microclimate, all these issues. And on the right-hand side, you can see a couple of examples of projects that we have been carrying out in Copenhagen that actually sort of demonstrate this with a very high degree of local community engagement in the development of the projects, but also located in areas where there was a need for physical upgrading of the neighborhoods, so that we are looking at something that not only serves a climate adaptation purpose, but has a wider resilience and a wider quality of life perspective for the citizens. Next slide, please. And here is one of our flagship projects, a whole park that has been transformed into a huge reservoir. You can't see it from the upside, but actually in case of a heavy cloudburst, this park can store more than 23,000 cubic meters of water. And that is a lot of water. Next slide. And moving then from the local level to the global level is that what we are doing also in Copenhagen is trying to share what we have been doing with other cities. And we can see, and that is something that I can see as part of the work that I'm doing for C40, is that water is a challenge for most cities around the world, whether it's because there's too much water or too little water. And COVID has increased the focus on water, because you need water in order to have, to wash your hands, you need access to clean water, you need access to good sanitation and so on. So there's a focus there. But there's also a focus based from COVID on green spaces. So the combination that we are trying to make in Copenhagen is also really attractive to other cities. So therefore, C40 also in these years has a lot of focus on water. And in C40, there are 3 networks working with water: Connecting Delta City, which is actually led by Rotterdam, focusing on coastal cities; urban flooding, which is a sort of inland flooding, whether it's fluvial or pluvial flooding; and water security network, which is mainly focusing on issues of water scarcity and water supply for cities. So there's an increase in focus on water in C40, and we can see that growing through also the project that I'm currently involved in, which is called WaterSafe Cities, which is a project where we are focusing on delivering research and solutions on climate change, water-related challenges for C40 cities. So this focus of sharing between cities about what are the problems that we're facing, looking for C40, for instance, to provide some of the data that cities need, and also cities basically sharing what they're doing between each other. That's a key focus for C40 in their work. And I think that was what I wanted to say now in my very brief time also. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Lieke, for your presentation. I would like to ask you, Lieke, we here in Amsterdam have the idea that there's a paradigm shift taking place in adaptation actions towards systemic adaptation, especially in the global south. People are informed by robust data and risks assessment tools. Could you elaborate a bit on that? Do you also see that shift?
Yes, there's a lot of, as you say, it's a sort of focus on a more systemic approach to adaptation. I think it's also because when you are in the global south, you are in a situation where you are basically starting from scratch. Which gives you an opportunity to actually also combine a lot of the issues that you're working with, establishing basic services alongside with your adaptation. And to have that, you need to have that kind of what you're talking about, risk assessment and so on.
the importance of local connections and local cooperation, and also really street level initiatives. Do you see people on the streets, the citizens, also seeing the urgency of this adaptation measures taking place, or is it still a bit more top down than we maybe like to see?
I think in many ways, sort of the overall planning is top down, and I think it will have to be top down. But I think you can do a lot of getting local community engagement. And I think once you've experienced events that have impacted you, there's a lot more understanding, I can assure you. Whereas if you haven't experienced anything, I don't think there's the same kind of understanding. But there's a lot of interest as soon as you also include other aspects of life. For instance, in the Global South, it's very important that a lot of these nature-based solutions that they're working with can actually also provide jobs and therefore also increased welfare for the local community.
Thanks a lot. Well, as you know, we have a bit of a tight schedule because there's plenty of experts in our webinar. We're really happy about it. So I'd like to move on to part 2, but be assured that I'll come back to you with the discussion at the end for the 20 minutes discussion we have planned. So going forwards to part 2, we would like to learn through examples of good practices and taking the examples from Copenhagen and Rotterdam as a basis. We'd like to know a bit more about how these good practices can overcome challenges in implementation and how they can be scaled up. So we will specifically take a look at 3 examples. And for the first one, I'd like to give the floor to Edgar Westerhof. He's the National Director for Flood Risk and Resiliency for North America at Arcadis. He will talk about the Adaptation for All program. Edgar, please, welcome to you, and please join us.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for having us today. And with us, I mean Lindsay Niratka, City of Boca Raton, myself on behalf of Arcadis, but also here the Dutch Embassy. So past decades, you know, as we know, the large metropolitan centers in the US like Boston, Miami, and which you can see maybe behind me, all have made big steps, you know, big steps to understand risk and resilience, and also make steps to adapt. And I think this understanding, you know, often was the result of large engagements, funding programs. We've had Dutch dialogues, we've had Rebuild by Design, we had the National Disaster Resilience Competition, and several of these cities are also and were partnered in the Rockefeller 100RC program, along with Rotterdam and many others. But on the other hand, we've also got a lot of feedback from smaller communities, coastal and inland waterway communities, oftentimes hard hit during extreme weather events, and often also with a lack of capacity and lack of financial means to step up and create a safer environment for their communities. So for these smaller cities, the Dutch Embassy, together with the American Flood Coalition and Arcadis, we developed the so-called Adaptation for All guide. And this guide is an easy to read handbook. It's for local community leaders who often have a broad responsibility. And the guide includes local case studies, best practices from the US and the Netherlands. And it came together following many interviews. The following presentation is a brief preview of a Florida case study from the Adaptation for All guide. And we are delighted that we have Lindsay here with us. She's the Sustainability Manager at the City of Boca Raton in Palm Beach County. And Lindsay has a broad international experience. She experienced the deeper meaning of resilience while serving at the Peace Corps as a volunteer in Honduras for several years. And she represents Boca Raton in a complex community resilience partnership, which she will tell us all about. Well, all maybe is a big word, Lindsay, in a couple of minutes that we have. But Lindsay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, in 5 minutes, I'm not sure I'm going to cover it all, but I'll do my best. So good afternoon, I believe, for you. Good morning for me. I am Lindsay Roland Niratka, and I'm here not only on behalf of the City of Boca Raton, but also the Coastal Resilience Partnership of Southeast Palm Beach County, or the CRP, as I'm going to be calling it from here on out. I'm going to be discussing today a little bit more in detail about how we formed the CRP and then how we're using this partnership to prepare the region for climate impacts. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the CRP is a group of 7 municipalities and the county who decided to start working together in order to begin to discuss and address sea level rise and climate resiliency. So just to orient you for a moment, Palm Beach County is in the southeastern part of Florida, which is the peninsula in the southeastern United States. Being a peninsula, being low-lying, and having a bedrock of limestone, sea level rise is a major concern here. The communities in the CRP have been engaged with another regional organization called the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact, which focuses on a 4-county region in southeastern Florida to specifically address sea level rise and other climate issues. And the CRP communities saw an opportunity to form a smaller collaboration to more closely focus on our own micro-regional needs, which do differ in some ways from the communities a little further to the south of us. So the CRP communities, we share waterways, watersheds, and infrastructure. Our communities all have similar physical, geographic, and social characteristics, which result in very similar climate impacts and threats. These similarities mean that we share vulnerabilities to climate impacts that as of yet, we had no comprehensive plan to prepare for and address. Considering the area covered by the CRP includes over 300,000 residents and $46 billion in property value, developing an assessment of climate vulnerability from which to plan resilience is extremely important. Next slide, please. The strength of the CRP is in the collaboration, so I'm going to take just a moment to go through how we got started and how we organized. So the communities began meeting in 2017, and in 2018, there was an opportunity for grant funding from the state of Florida through the Florida Resilient Coastline Program. Rather than applying for funding as individual communities and thus be in competition with each other, the group decided that we should apply together and start the regional partnership that became the CRP. This regional approach not only proved helpful in receiving the grant funding, it also helped us gain the attention of other resources. In 2019, the CRP received pro bono assistance from Harvard University's Emmett Environmental Law and Policy Clinic, and the Harvard students were invaluable in helping us determine the appropriate governance structure for the CRP and how to split the cost of the climate change vulnerability assessment. Because the CRP includes larger cities such as Boca Raton, which has close to 100,000 residents, as well as small cities with fewer than 2,000, a simple even split of cost would not have worked. However, we did need a logical, equitable, and defendable way to allocate the cost, and the Harvard students helped us find that. This process of developing a scope of work for the assessment, determining the legal framework to do the project, and figuring out the financials, including which community would take the lead as the fiscal agent, took us most of 2019. By the start of 2020, we were ready to bring on our consultants and start doing the assessment. As you are all aware, the COVID-19 pandemic required us to pivot rather quickly to keep the process going through the virtual engagement, and also allowed us to change our focus a little bit to think more about the vulnerabilities that we were seeing with the pandemic as well. So we are about ready to release our final report, and all of the CRP communities are presenting to our elected boards next month. So we're excited to share that. Next slide, please. The final assessment covered 12 different climate threats and the vulnerability to those threats of a variety of assets within the study area. The threat and asset pair example that I've provided here is tidal flooding impact on residential property. And we see increasing vulnerability over time, as much as 7 to 10-fold by 2070. Having a regional study allows all the communities in the CRP to work together to make sure we're planning and preparing for these future impacts. The assessment includes recommended strategies for adaptation, and while each community will receive a list tailored to their specific needs, there are also recommendations that can be approached on a regional scale and are opportunities for future CRP projects. The strategy highlighted here, creating incentives to divert future development from vulnerable areas, is something that all communities can design together and make a more cohesive development strategy in the region and plan for future resilience. Next slide, please. So creating a vulnerability assessment as a regional collaboration has had many benefits. For one, there are economies of scale and shared resources when you work together. The cost of the regional assessment is less than what individual assessments for all the communities would have been, and make the assessment far more affordable for all. Some of the communities, such as Boynton Beach, Delray Beach, and Boca Raton, have dedicated sustainability staff, while other communities' CRP representatives have different responsibilities within their organizations. This range of roles was important for bringing a breadth of expertise to the CRP, and we all filled in according to our strengths. Since climate impacts do not stop at political boundaries. Having a regional assessment will allow us to create a regional strategy, and implementation of adaptation strategies as a region will also have economies of scale. A regional approach has proved beneficial already when seeking support and funding so far, and hopefully that continues as we move into the implementation phases. And maybe most importantly, at least personally, this work is hard and it is existential, and having a supportive group of people with whom to work is extremely helpful. This project would not be what it was without the incredible partners in the CRP. So now that the assessment is almost complete, the really hard work of implementation will begin. I hope that the model we've created and which was shared in the Adaptation for All manual can be a help and an inspiration for other communities that find strength in numbers while addressing climate resiliency. And so I know that was a big project in a short time, but thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay, for your presentation. I have just one question for you. You talked about the governance structure that had to be implemented. Was that a big deal, and does it also help you to attract the investments needed?
Well, in terms of helping to attract investments, I think that for a lot of the funding that we'll need in the future, the idea, excuse me.
Water is always a good idea.
The idea of having a regional collaboration, I think, is really important because I mentioned economies of scale. The funding can cover kind of a bigger area and do more with this regional structure. And the governance structure that we ended up with after the Harvard students put together a very comprehensive guide of different ways we could do it, is we decided to have kind of this more informal structure with the Coastal Resilience Partnership where every community has one representative. And as we go forward with future projects, you know, this assessment is hopefully just the beginning. And as we go forward with future ones, we have this cost share structure, and we have kind of this the structure of putting together interlocal agreements in order to go into these projects together, which hopefully can be very helpful in helping some of the smaller communities in particular afford some of the work that we're going to be doing in the future.
Cheers, thanks a lot, Lindsay. Let's switch from Boca Raton in Florida to Amsterdam. We'll talk about the Resilio project, and Joyce Langewen knows all about it. She's policy advisor for climate adaptation for the city of Amsterdam, and she's also assistant project manager for Resilio. And I'd like to hear more about that. So Joyce, welcome, and please take the stage.
Thank you, Bart, and thank you for having me here. Well, the Resilio project actually uses an integrated local solution to reduce the impact of different weather extremes, and the solution is based on the sponge city concept. As you know, in the Netherlands, we've always lived with water, and actually we used to get rid of the water as soon as it fell down. However, due to the climate change, Amsterdam is actually increasingly facing lengthy periods of heat and droughts. This causes wood rot and structural building damage, for example, because of groundwater level degrees, but also heat stress for our city residents. And actually, therefore, we need to save our water. But at the same time, more extreme rainfall showers would result in more pluvial flooding in the city, and that can overflow our sewer systems. So in other words, we actually need additional space for water that we can store, but we can also reuse or squeeze it out when necessary as a sponge. And that's where the roof landscape comes in, and we can use the roof landscape for water management since existing public space is limited in densely populated cities. Next slide, please. Well, with Resilio, we are actually, I don't think this is the right slide, but we'll get there. Yeah, that one, perfect, thanks. With Resilio, we're actually repurposing 10,000 square meters of rooftop, and we do that in climate vulnerable neighborhoods in the city by creating a smart blue-green network that can store water and therefore reduce the impact of the heavy rain. Roofs are also expected to reduce the urban heat island effects because of the evaporation of the plants, and the plants will also benefit the city's biodiversity. What makes it a unique project is that all roofs are actually connected in a smart network. And this network enables remote regulation of rooftop water levels based on, for example, weather forecast and other water management settings. So we are actually creating an entirely new type of adaptive urban water management. Next slide, please. So we're making a shift in urban water management from public space to more micro water management on private property. And in case of Resilio, we do that by using the roofs of 3 housing corporations. But in able to pull this off, participation is actually key, and local stakeholder dialogue is a key element. I think something is going wrong with the slides, but participation is organized in different ways in our project. For example, by organizing meetings for local residents, but also by informing them by webinars, yeah, on street level. Then let me go back to the technique, and then this is the right slide. Actually, through a public supported decision support system, the privately owned water buffers can be optimized for the retention capability of the water. While still in development, the system contains different data streams, both on macro and micro level. And actually those streams decide whether or not to open the smart valve. On macro level, you could think about groundwater levels. I'm sorry, the infographic is not yet translated to English, so I hope you don't mind I put up the Dutch one. Other macro indicators are the weather forecasts, or for example, geographical characteristics. On the micro level, it's about how much storage space is there actually on the roof, or for example, additional wishes of the house owner in case he or she wants to water their plants or flush the toilets. Next slide, please. If I zoom in a little bit more, how does a smart system work? And then actually I'll zoom into the weather forecasts.
You have a specific slide in mind, Joyce? Please help us out a bit. You're doing fine, by the way, but just so we have the right slide in front of us.
Yeah, it's the slide. The other one, the 4K. Yeah, this one. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're talking about the forecast-based operation of blue-green roofs as new urban climate adaptation solution. So how we use the smart system. The smart system of the smart valve opens actually when the rainfall precipitation forecasted by the AIWW, which is the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, exceeds the capacity of the blue layer. And in that case, we actually create a new layer so the water can be stored. As a consequence, the system, the system leaves or let go of the water, and yeah, and it's based on the forecasts. Yeah, and therefore we try to make sure that there is a decrease of pressure on the drainage system. So the water on the roofs can actually be used as a buffer. Please use the next slide. And next slide, please. I don't know what happened with the slides, but there's one more slide which actually shows some first research results, because the project it's a project where different stakeholders work together. So we also work with the university, the VU University in this case, and they have done a model-based study on the basis of this forecast operation, and that shows some interesting results. For example, without the smart steering, 65% of the extreme rainfall or precipitation can be stored. But then using the weather, the forecast-based operation, actually 80% of all the rain can be stored. So that shows the significance of using a smart system. I can.
Joyce, sorry for a short interruption, but can you go towards a conclusion, please?
Yeah, I definitely will. Yeah, I actually would like to end with an invitation for you to collaborate. We see the smart water management system fit for introduction in other major city scoping with different climate stresses. The decision support system has the possibility to be tweaked to local characteristics, and we invite you to join the Amsterdam Agreement in the Amsterdam International Water Week in November to start exchange for the solution.
Thanks a lot, Joyce. I really like the analogy of the city as a sponge. I really take that with me. And let's go straight to building with nature. I'd like to invite Fokko van der Groot on stage. He's senior environmental engineer at Boskalis, and he's also program manager at Ecoshape. And I'd like to hear a bit more about Ecoshape in particular. So Fokko, please join us.
Thank you very much, Bart, for having me in this session. So indeed, my name is Fokko van der Groot. I work as a program manager at Ecoshape. And I would like to tell a little bit more about this program, and in particular the case study in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So during the past 12 years, Ecoshape, which is a Dutch consortium of organizations from different sectors, mainly working on water-related issues, have collectively worked together on knowledge development of nature-based solutions in the hydraulic infrastructure world. And the building with nature approach, which integrates the forces of nature into the infrastructure designs to benefit economy and the society and the environment, has been applied in over 10 pilot projects over these 12 years. And these projects range from ecosystem restoration, port developments, and nature-based flood defense protection systems. And you can see here a few examples on the right side. On the top right, you see the Markerwadde development, Marconi project in the middle in Delfzijl. And on the bottom right, the Sand Engine, which is quite a well-known nature-based solutions project along the north coast of the Netherlands. And we have applied a learning by doing approach. So by testing these concepts in the field, we have learned how to deal with the dynamics of nature in these nature-based solutions. And we have captured these lessons in guidelines and have published them, and they're all available online, so for others to apply in their own cases. And actually, several of our pilots have resulted in a full-scale upscaling of these concepts. And I would like to highlight one of our cases of how to implement an integrated building with nature approach. Next slide, please. And that's the example in Indonesia. So in the Mak, which is located along the north coast of Java in Indonesia, it's a 20-kilometer stretch of coast. And this area is heavily impacted as a result of the removal of mangrove belt. In the early 80s, this area was flourishing in rice agriculture, but this system collapsed, and the farmers transformed their livelihood from rice field to agriculture. And as a result, mangrove systems were removed, sediment erosion occurred, and to top that, people started to extract groundwater, especially in the city of Semarang, which is very close to the Mak. And as a result, heavily land subsidence occurred, over 10 centimeters per year. So in this area, actually, sea level rise is a non-issue because of this high rates of land subsidence. The area is now characterized by aquaculture of shrimps and milkfish, but it's hardly productive anymore due to the erosion and the frequent flooding. Next slide, please. So through a series of physical and economical, socio-economic measures, we have been able to show that a transformation to a sustainable land use is possible in these type of areas. and this type of area occurs a lot in the Southeast Asian region, not only in Indonesia but also Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines. So this is very relevant for the entire region. To highlight some of the measures we have and achievements we have reached, we have constructed over 4 kilometers of permeable structures, and these permeable structures, they enhance natural sedimentation, and again these sedimentation enhance natural mangrove recruitment. And this is a preferred measure over planting mangroves, which is done in many locations, but most of the time these fail, these planting activities. So instead of doing planting, we try to restore the natural system where mangroves can recruit in a natural way. We have formed over 10 community groups, empowering over 150 farmers to who are trained in the use of sustainable aquaculture. And as a result of this training, over 400 hectares of sustainable aquaculture was realized, including riverine mangrove restoration within these aquaculture systems. And as a result, the income has increased over 3 times compared to the conventional aquaculture they were applying before this intervention. So although the area of aquaculture was decreased due to the implementation of mangrove restoration, but still their income and productivity has increased over 3 times. In 7 villages, we have established regulations on coastal management that supports the protection of mangroves. The concept has been replicated by our Indonesian partner, the Ministry of Marine Fisheries, who've replicated the concept in over 9 locations across Indonesia. Next slide, please. So the enablers for implementation of the building with nature approach. Actually, the key aspect of our success and of a successful building with nature approach is the intersectoral collaboration from the very beginning of a project development, and also in this case, working together with local, provincial, and national governments, working together with knowledge institutes like Deltares, working together with NGOs, local NGOs, but also global NGOs like Wetlands International, having foot on the ground with a field team that is permanently present in these villages, but also working together with the private sector, contractors, and engineering firms in let's say in a collaborative way. It was key and fundamental for the success of this project. Capacity building of the local communities takes time, but pays off. We have invested time over 2 years in creating these community groups and setting up coastal field schools to train them in the application of sustainable aquaculture. That takes time, but in the end, that created a lot of commitments and support from the local communities in applying these measures. Nature-based solutions, we have shown that these can generate, have an income-generating capacity. So there's a business model behind this. It's not only providing flood protection, it's not only providing a safer place to live, but it also provides an alternative and improved livelihood for the communities. So it increased their income, and it also provided alternative livelihoods in the form of increase in wild catch and increase in ecosystem services from these mangroves. Adaptive management to deal with the uncertainties. The dynamic nature of mangrove system required an adaptive approach when restoring them. So applying the lessons learned in the improvement of the design and the maintenance strategies has turned out to be a very important aspect of our project. And last but not least, the political willingness and institutional collaboration. The Indonesian government, public works, and the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries has shown that replication is possible of these innovative ideas if there's a willingness to collaborate and to learn from them and to use these innovative solutions. I would, as a final remark, I would like to refer to the paper that is visible on the right-hand side, Building with Nature, a future-proof strategy for coping with a changing and uncertain world. This is a white paper that we published a couple of months ago, and it goes into detail about how to deal with the dynamics of nature in nature-based solutions and how to deal with the uncertainties. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Fokko. Great stuff, and well, there's plenty of stuff I'd like to ask you, but due to the limited time, let's see if we can highlight a few questions in the discussion later on. And this also goes back to the participants. If you have questions, please let us know via the Q&A. We've talked about investments and that are needed for adaptation measures, and let's dive a bit deeper in those financial aspects of today's topic. Moving forward to part 3, financial investments in water projects, and the discussion afterwards. For this, I'd like to invite Emilia Pistrica. She's a water sector engineer at the European Investment Bank. And before she will give her presentation on the financial angle to this topic, there's 2 slides I'd like to present shortly about the European Investment Bank. It is actually the largest multilateral lender and borrower in the world, having invested 1.2 trillion euros in the last 60 years. And headquartered in Luxembourg, there's 50 offices around the world. And the next slide says a little bit more about the EIB being the new EU climate bank. There's quite some high ambitions having formulated. There's talk about the increase of finance for climate adaptation to at least 50% in 2025. They will be aligned with the Paris Agreement, and their support for 1 trillion euros of investment in climate action and environmental sustainability this decade. So there's plenty of stuff going on, and I'd like to give Emilia the floor to take this topic further. Emilia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart, and thank you all for having me here. I will start very quickly. Let's see first where we stand as water sector in the European Investment Bank. Actually, what you see from this graph is that we have already achieved to be aligned with the first commitment of EIB, which is basically to increase our financing, our annual financing, more than 50% to be dedicated to green investments by 2025. So you see here the evolution of the climate action contribution the last 6 years in the water sector, and you can also note very quickly that the last 3 years we had a significant increase from about 30% to 50%, and actually last year was exceptionally good. We reached in climate action, we reached 1.7 billion euros. You also see a split between adaptation and mitigation per year, and you can also easily observe that usually in our climate action figures we do more in adaptation than mitigation. About 60% of climate action in water sector is attributed to adaptation, out of which 40% is generated by flood control and water supply projects. Next slide, please. Thank you. Very briefly to mention that we have updated our EIB climate strategy last year. That means the guidelines for climate action, how to estimate climate action, the eligibility criteria for every sector for both climate mitigation and adaptation. And also to mention that we have now a climate risk assessment system fully integrated as a business process in the EIB project assessment cycle and in our IT architecture, which basically means in practical terms that for every loan that we give, we systematically screen our projects and assess the physical climate risk in projects and the physical climate vulnerability within the project areas. We assess the adaptation measures that this project brings and the residual risk after the project completion. This applies to all direct lending activities since the February of 2019. It is being implemented, and obviously it's a dynamic process, which means basically that we update it, building on the evolving international good practice. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to some project examples, I chose to give you an idea of a post-disaster project that we are financing now in Mozambique. This is a project that supports the reconstruction of water, wastewater and drainage infrastructure of towns that were hit by the cyclones Ida and Kenneth in spring 2019. Those were two of the top 5 worst storms that ever hit Mozambique. It caused an unprecedented amount of damage, obviously, and the idea here is, the decision made was to give a framework loan, which is exceptionally financed by the bank 100%, being a post-disaster recovery operation, because what we do in our core business is to finance up to 50% of the project investment cost, but here we finance 100%. So the loan amount is set at 100 million euros, and it is being complemented by a 10 million technical assistance grant coming from the Commission. What we achieve here by having this type of loan that we call a framework loan is to give the flexibility, the needed flexibility to the government of Mozambique to select which sub-projects will be benefited by the loan, because obviously the available information at the beginning was not sufficient enough for us to do a full appraisal of every scheme, but also it was needed from the promoter side the flexibility to allocate the various donors' pledges to the reconstruction needs of the country. Usually we do this type of loans, we use them with strong promoters, but this is acceptable here because we have complemented the loan with a 10 million grant, which will ensure the efficient project implementation. We will make sure that the capacity of the promoter is good enough for the project to be compliant with the bank's environmental and social standards and our procurement guidelines, and last but not least, to improve the climate resilience of the EU water-related investments. Next slide, please. This is a completely different type of project. This is to demonstrate another type of loan. It's a multi-beneficiary intermediate loan. We call it MBIL. We give this type of loans to intermediary financial institutions such as national promotional banks. In this case, it's the AIWW, the second largest public sector bank in the Netherlands. And then the intermediaries on-led EIP funds to the final beneficiaries, which is in this case small and medium-sized projects that have been promoted by water boards. The specific project, the specific operation, let's call it operation, it's dedicated only to water investments, targeting flood control and water resources management projects. And the restriction here is that at least a minimum of 50% of the total value of the schemes that will be benefited from this loan should be eligible for climate action. We call it climate window. And my last slide, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is to say, to spare a few minutes to say a few words on an initiative that we launched last year. It is, the full name is Climate City Climate Finance Gap Fund. It targets cities in low and middle income countries. It is focusing on projects for mitigation and adaptation, but what offers is early stage technical assistance for project preparation. And it has to be functionally linked with urban environment, so it has to be situated in a city. And another eligibility criterion is that the beneficiary, in other words, the expression of interest that will be submitted in the dedicated side to benefit from the grant is intended to be for a city, a local authority, or a municipal council. The GAP Fund is an initiative of the governments of Germany and Luxembourg, together with a global covenant of mayors for climate and energy, and is being implemented by the World Bank and the European Investment Bank. That is all I have in this brief slot. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Emilia. Yes, we've made it a bit difficult for ourselves to invite that many experts in such a short time. So it's difficult to squeeze all the expertise in the time slots we have provided for you. But thanks a lot for your presentation. Let's move to the discussion. We have another 14 minutes for the discussion, and the outcomes of the discussion will also be taken towards the COP26 and the Amsterdam International Water Week later this year. The Water Week being later this year. And I'd also like to invite Casper Spaan with us. Invite him with us. He's advisor for climate adaptation, spatial development at Waternet. So Casper is a colleague of mine. Casper, thanks for joining us. And,
thank you, Bart.
Hi, Casper. Hi. So there's several questions I would like to ask, and last shout outs to the participants. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A so we can select them for our panelists. But first of all, maybe to Arnoud, we've talked a lot about local governments, regional cooperation. What role do national governments play in this global adaptation, these ambitions we all have?
Good question, Bart. I'm not really an expert on the national level, but what I have seen during the CAS, the Climate Adaptation Summit, one of the main issues is that a lot of globally, and especially in the global south, a lot of financing is going towards national governments, and that there is a difficulty how to get these finances to the cities where they really have to take action on the ground. So that mechanism from national governments to local government actually is an important issue. So it's why I also put on the chat, I really would like to have a chat with Emilia from the AEB the EIB to talk about this. But
do you have a specific question for now to Emilia, or is it really the
I put it on the chat. It's a proposal and a request from my side to have later on a chat about this, with pleasure. Thank you. And finally, I think it's also, of course, it's important that both on national levels there is a development to work towards national adaptation plans, and that for a lot of cities is very helpful. But having said that, at the same time, I think, and I think my other city experts will agree, each city also needs to zoom into the specific situation and develop their own urban adaptation strategies to become climate resilient.
Thanks. I'd like to give the floor to Casper, who has a question.
Well, to elaborate on Arnoud's statement that eventually we have to work local on all our challenges, but we face the global challenge of climate change. And how can we work together with all the communities that were mentioned earlier to share that knowledge? Because now I still see a lot of strategic dialogue between the internationally focused colleagues in the field, And I think we need more sharing on a tactical and operational level for mainstreaming all that knowledge, because there is so much knowledge already there, but how do we share it?
I fully agree, and maybe we also can switch to Lieke to talk about the C40. I think networks like the C40, but also the Resilient Cities Network and many other city networks are, I think, crucial in this case, to exchange knowledge, and I think it's not doable to create a network of networks, but let's use the existing networks. And the Global Center on Adaptation is also just launched a kind of a water resilience community. That's also a space to exchange best practices. But that's crucial. I fully agree, actually.
Thanks, Arnoud, and let's invite Lieke to react on Casper's question. You have to unmute, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, I thought I had. I think Arno is absolutely right. I mean, there are plenty of organizations and so on. What we need to do is actually to work much more together here, and using the different strengths of the different organizations. C40 is also collaborating with organizations like Ecoshape and World Resource Institute and I mean the GGA. So there's a lot of things going on across here. And it's also about what can the different organizations do. The benefit of C40 is the fact that they are they have these both the political and the local levels very close. I mean, the networks have, I can say for me and for Copenhagen, it has been a huge importance to be part first of the Connecting Delta Cities network, and secondly also of the Urban Flooding Network, because it's giving us a huge access to knowledge, to feedback from other cities that are in the same situation. And very often it's just that you need somebody who's actually saying, okay, you are on the right track on doing something here, or somebody you can call. I mean, when we started working on adaptation in Copenhagen, we invited Arno to Copenhagen actually to persuade our management that it was actually a good idea. And he did a very good job. So we were allowed to start working on it. So that cities can help each other in many, many ways in this process. And I think it's important that we provide, organizations can provide the framework. Other organizations are good at collecting data. They can do that, and then we can share. I think it's about doing what you do best and not compete with each other.
Thank you, Lieke. Question for Foko. You talked about the guidelines during your presentation, and I wonder if these are applicable worldwide without any additional technical expertise or high-level expertise, or is really is some kind of assistance needed to apply these guidelines?
A very good question. Of course, like I explained in my presentation, can you hear me or not?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Especially with regards to nature-based solutions, nature-based solutions are inherently different than the traditional engineering solutions. So understanding of the local context, the physical context, the ecological context, but also the socio-economic context is super important to apply nature-based solutions that fit the local system. So there are concepts, so they are, and we know how these concepts work. But there's always a translation needed to the local context. So local expertise is always needed. So that's why this collaboration from a very early start with local partners is key. So these guidelines are there, but they also always need to be translated to the local context.
Therefore, assistance is needed, you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but there's a global network of experts that can do that.
Thanks. Moving on to Edgar, speaking of medium and smaller cities, how do you think financial investments and community ownership of the solutions have been connected? Do you have some examples of this in the US?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, we know that public investments through federal or state sources, it needs to come with a process, a participatory planning process. And I've been in the US now for about a decade. And I believe that, processes like Dutch Dialogues, Rebuild by Design, 100 Resilient Cities, they were really turning points in how to create like investable buy-in. So there's the community side of things, but also, the broader stakeholder buy-in, which can come with resources. And I think, while that long-term planning is definitely a European or maybe even a Dutch quality, that grassroots engagement is definitely something we do really well in the US. And, we've heard Lindsay speak to that, really bottom up, creating something that communities can stand behind is a reason why why funding will find its way to projects that will see daylight. I think also in this regard, it's good to explore. Of course, this in November, where we can share these best practices in more detail. I think it's intriguing now post-COVID or getting post-COVID to see what digital tools can bring here. Arno, you spoke to that. What are the new developments in this regard? How you can utilize virtual reality, augmented reality? We all know that digital engagement is now common practice, but how can you work with that common practice to bring these new digital technologies to a broader group of people? Digital twins, we are really at a threshold of exploring and finding these kind of applications. It's already happening in Lower Manhattan, but we also need to bring this, of course, to our smaller communities. The Adaptation for All Guide is touching on it, but there's a whole world to win there. And of course, then there's the application of apps that can bring or gain feedback through our community. So all these examples, I think, speak to what creates an investable buy-in and gives trust to federal and state sources to invest money. And we see under the new administration, the Biden administration, a tremendous push in this direction. So I'm quite hopeful, actually, that we are on the right track. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. As we are creeping towards the end of the discussion, please, participants or experts, if you have questions for one another, let me know. In the meantime, I have a question for Emilia. Focko talked about the income generating capacity of nature-based solutions. Do you think that will increase the possibility of investing in these projects? Does it make it easier to find money for that?
Yes, the NBS, the nature-based solutions, has been always, that is the issue with the NBS. We all understand that we need to support biodiversity, and NBS is an excellent example for this, but the issue always comes when it comes to the financing, it's creating revenues. For us, the European Investment Bank, we together with the climate action, we are also, as I mentioned in the presentation that I gave, we are committed to deliver on environmental sustainability. And one of the major points within the environmental sustainability is the nature-based solutions. We already have developed financing facilities dedicated, for example, to such types of projects, nature-based solutions. For example, I can mention to you the Natural Capital Financing Facility, NCFF, which has started in 2015, and it's dedicated, meaning that targets only such types of investments. And although it was quite challenging to implement it in the beginning, now that we see the last 2 years that it finally we have managed to finance projects under NCFF, which means for us that we are financing much smaller ticket projects. So we're talking about a 10 million project investment cost, which for us is it's quite small, and we are financing up to a 75% if the aim is to implement nature-based solutions, and we are also giving up to 1 million technical support for that, so up to a 10% of the loan that someone will receive under this facility. But of course, we are always trying to give as many possibilities as possible to as many different types of projects as possible, so as to reach out not only for a nature-based solution financing, but also for what I mentioned just before in the presentation, for giving technical assistance, which means only grants, not loans, to city networks, to prepare projects with a specific climate focus, a mitigation or adaptation within an urban environment, such as the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, which goes well beyond our core business.
A lot. On a really final note, final question for Lindsay. There's some really interesting insights you presented about the Boca Raton and the regional area around Boca Raton. Do you have well, ideas on how to share those lessons with other cities in Florida, the US, or worldwide?
Yes, absolutely. Well, as I said, we have our final report, which will be available next month. So that will be freely available on our websites for people to look at and to use. We also, many of the communities within our project are involved with regional networks, such as, the Florida Sustainability Directors Network and the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, which is all of North America. And we're happy to talk to anyone about our experience. And I think it really could be scalable. What we've done with kind of combining larger communities like Boca Raton with smaller communities to do this sort of regional work, I think absolutely could be applied almost anywhere in the world.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay. Well, this is really going towards the conclusion of this webinar. Thanks a lot to all participants and the questions asked. And of course, a special thanks to all our experts who shared their insights and expertise. So thanks a lot for joining us this Friday afternoon in the Netherlands and morning or evening in other parts of the world. I'd like to take you to some important data in the months to come, at least from our perspective. This is the third of a series of 4 webinars taking place leading towards the Amsterdam International Water Week. So the last webinar will take place on September 9th. On a different time frame, we will start 12 o'clock in the afternoon in the Netherlands again, 75 minutes for our last seminar with Henk Ovink, the climate envoy of the Dutch government, being with us. So we're happy to invite him on that last webinar. And of course, the Amsterdam International Water Week taking place in the first week of November. So once again, thanks a lot for joining us and hope to see you again in September. And of course, during the Amsterdam International Water Week in November. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.